Written by Donna Knight. Get out, shop, or do errands. Anything to get away from that empty house and just sitting thinking about the prospect of more winter. This is the blah, blah, blah. This is the philosophy used by Mrs. Herbert Baumeister to deal with the winter blahs, the letdown that follows the holidays. The blah move is once the parties are over, children return to school, and everyone heads back to work, the short euphoric relief of "I made it through Christmas" fades at the bleak prospect of entering January and February. The temperature hovers around zero, cars are sluggish, everyone else seems to be in or heading towards Florida. Instead of cheery greeting cards, the mail brings bills and income tax forms. A house drab without the holiday decorations begs for attention. Projects delayed by the holidays beckon social obligation nag. But the blahs, victims, there's little for, sorry, let me start again. But for the blahs victims, there's little energy for resuming a routine. Even active, busy women feel the letdown when the excitement of the holiday succumbs to winter doldrums. I've sure got 'em, says Julie Baumeister, but I've learned to ignore the inevitable and escape. Later, I'll get started on plans for things like installing storage shelves in the basement and fixing up the house so we won't have indoor work once spring is here. But right now, getting out is the only answer. Jeez. As publicity chairman for Sunnyside Guild, which sponsors Town Hall, she must get to work on the January 26th session of the lecture series, but that can wait until next week. Blahs evaporate while she's out of the house, but at home, I end up discovering depressing things like mealy mugs or the fern and the closets to be cleaned. Wait, let me start that over. Blahs evaporate while she's out of the house, but at home, I end up discovering depressing things like mealy bugs on the ferns and closets to be cleaned. So instead, I take clothes to the cleaners or go look for upholstery materials, anything to get me out for a while. Anything to get me out of her house for a while. I found this article and it was written in January of 78. Herbert has a lot of middle initials, so I'm not really sure which one is actually his. I looked through newspapers, ancestry, and some FBI files I found. So I'm going to go with R because his dad was. Now we're going to head over to newspapers. Hey, Babs. Hi, you guys still there? Hi, you guys still there? Ooh. Turn that off. So I guess I am. Hey, Sarge. Okay. So I have been digging through newspapers.com, which I love. So pull this up. It's going to be really slow. Yay. See, I've been really busy. Oh my gosh. Oh, wow, crime. Yikes. Oh, I know why. I can't find it because I printed it. Herbert Baumeister. He used the alias of Brian Stats on a lot of the different podcasts and articles online that are recent. It has it as Brian Smart. And from everything that I have read, including the FBI paperwork, it was Brian Stats, Staats. He was a white male born on April 7th of 1947. His alias went by April 7th of 1952. I guess he liked to be young. And he had two houses. His early life, he was pretty much. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. He was really reclusive. Like he did. His family were. His dad was named Herbert, of course, and Elizabeth Baumeister, and they are pretty much from Ohio and Indiana. And he was an anesthesiologist in Indianapolis, and they lived in Indianapolis. They also had a lake home at Lake Wawasee, which was kind of one of the things that made me want to take a deeper look at this case because we used to go there as kids all the time. And their kids they have three, and they're around my age. So I was like, oh, interesting. But the Baumeisters were kind of high society, I guess. They were in these guilds and chairmans of this and chair ladies of that, and a parliament. One, like his mom was in some kind of parliament. I'm not really sure what that means. I didn't take time to look it up, but they were in the papers a lot. And the farther you go back in newspapers, the more interesting it gets because they turn into Facebook and Twitter and things like that because they have the social columns that are huge, and they're literally just like who had a party this week, who went where with who, when, why, what movies were playing. I mean, they were really into pomp and circumstance of having parties at their house, and the Bowders were among the special guests. They were actually named special guests at weddings. I guess you could do that. Like you were having, like, you were going to have someone special at your wedding. And, if they were something, you put them in the newspaper to let them know you care, I guess. So they had all these attendees. Am I glitching out? Oh, okay. Thank you. But, so that was his family. And if you remember back in the late 70s, 80s, and really into the 90s, especially in the 90s with the AIDS epidemic and HIV that were huge. And from these papers, we have progressed some, still not quite enough at all. But um, like I found this one article, and it's basically about how this boy got expelled from school for wearing an earring. And I guess only gay people wore earrings. Back when Herb was in his glory days, and being gay was pretty much a scarlet letter. Um, you were less than, which is really sad. And that's why Herb, who he liked to be called was Herb, he was in the closet, and he actually did have like skeleton, not in his actual closet, but like in his backyard. Like we'll get there. I'm sorry. I'm so excited. I get ahead of myself. But this guy just fascinated me for some reason. He was actually pretty good looking as a kid. Pull up some pictures of him, maybe. There we go. There was one article that was really good. I think I actually put good read on it. And I did find it interesting on, how you have that when his friends, high school classmates just in general, teachers, whatnot, neighbors, were asked about him by the papers, by the reporters, before they had actually determined that he was a serial killer. Their recollections were a lot cleaner, and they were minding their words. This happened in Hamilton County, and Hamilton County actually refused for quite a long time to allow them to acquire a search warrant because these men were missing from downtown area in Broad Ripple from different gay bars. Like, Some of them weren't, but I guess they were hangouts. They had, Vogue was one. There was quite a few different ones where he would drive and meet these men and then take them back to his pool. But we'll get there. So his early life, he was basically just kind of a chess nerd, and he see, there he is right there. Like, he was pretty, I mean, he wasn't like, I don't know how to blow it up, but there. 1965 at North Central. Blah, blah. Yeah, see, like he was okay. Herb was there were some stories about his childhood, but I didn't find them in the original newspapers, and I always like to try to go like, people's recollection probably maybe not so much right after. So I'm guessing that all of the other, um, media outlets that I got information from are probably correct, that he was a big weirdo and he liked to, like, pee on people's desks and do all kinds of weird things was probably true, because in this article, which was before he was even, he was just suspected of this. It was happened on June 24th of 1996, and his son had found a bone, and then somehow he had taken his son to the lake. They were not getting along at all and were in the process of a divorce, and he had his son. And so basically she kind of used the incident where he'd found a bone. And then prior to that, in 1994, she had found a skeleton, like a whole one with skull and all, in their backyard, and had asked him about it, and he was like, "Oh, it's my dad's." His dad died in 1986, and so he said, "Oh, my dad gave me the skeleton, and so it's just out there, you know." But little did she know, so she threw the skull away, like, in the freaking trash can. It was a real skull of a murdered person, and, she just continually disbelieved him. And I found that article so interesting because here it is, anything to get out of the house. They married in 1971, and in 1972, he was committed for, like, 45 days to an institute from his dad. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and some other, um, like, kinda like OCD. I don't really know that he had that. I think that diagnosis wasn't really, they didn't really know enough about it back then, and so everybody that was different, and it coulda just been that he was a homosexual gay man. I mean, they seemed to be very against that, especially in like, Indiana. And so he, probably a lot because he was considered like a lust killer, so probably a lot of his, um issues, probably daddy issues, and they probably stemmed from a suppressed living a suppressed life. Like, he wasn't able to be who he was. And there's some articles that I'm probably not going to be able to find. But hey, Truth or Ange, um, because he he was basically just a huge contradiction. And you find that in people that are not able to be who they truly are. And they're not taught that it is okay to be who they are. You have a list of standards that you have to live up to, and if you don't, you better fake it till you make it. That's a lot how even in churches you see that, where it's your one way out about, and then when you're at the home, in your home, it's a completely different life. And I think that Herb had that. His family was very religious. The Lutheran seems to go all the way back, like for grandparents, great grandparents were all Lutheran, a couple Methodists, but religious background, and they made a lot of money. And so he did go to IU after he graduated. And like I said, in high school, he had been, there was rumors that he'd put a crow on a teacher's desk, like a dead crow, just like flopped it down on her desk. Then he peed on a teacher's desk. He was just kind of weird. And that continued on. He did go to IU, which is in Bloomington. His dad went there as well. He and his sister. So the pressures to go there was probably why he went there. He was smart, but he didn't necessarily do really good in school. His brother, however, did. At least one of them. He was an honor roll student. And one of his brothers actually died when he was 36 years old. His name was Richard, and he lived in Texas. Hey, Otto. And so he dropped out after a semester at IU. He came back home, lived with mommy and daddy. But while he was there, he met Juliana Sater was her last name back then. And her parents had died really young. Her dad was only 49 when he died. And it was only a couple years before they married. And her mom died a year before they got married, probably not even a year. So here she is in the 70s. They were both very conservative. They were part of the Republican movement. And back then, you would have stood out like a sore thumb because everyone was into the hippie thing. And they were not. And so I think they gravitated towards each other because of that. And I often wonder if she didn't cling on to Herb, there had to have been signs. I mean, he's already in a psychiatric institute right after you just met and you marry him when he gets out. Like, something ain't right. But I don't know what caused her parents' death. It could have been natural, but they died. And so here she is. Back then, you didn't just live by yourself, even if you were a grown ass adult. That would, especially a woman did not do that. And so especially, the type of woman we're talking about here, the higher society, the Republican, very conservative. You followed a certain social status, and his family was prominent in the Hamilton County area, especially in Indianapolis. And so I kind of think maybe she ignored some of those signs, because there's always signs, because of losing her parents so young. And she was smart. She was a teacher. She was a college graduate. She was really pretty, and she had a lot going for her. And so Herb was good looking, but he had never had a girlfriend before that. Like, he was very socially awkward. And then here he is. His dad is putting him in a psychiatric institute. So they get married in 1971, and they move into an apartment, and he worked for the paper. He actually worked for the Indianapolis Star that ended up writing about him incessantly, which was kind of one of the ironies of this dude, because I found a ton, just full of ironies everywhere. He was, like I said, he worked for the Indianapolis Star. His dad got him the job, and he did not really fit in, but he was very meticulous. Everyone always explained him as meticulous. But he was also a hot mess. Like, he liked to his dress code was very tailored. He liked $300 pairs of shoes. He was very fancy. He wore always kind of put together, and he was meticulous about his work. But he couldn't hack it there. No surprise with the when you follow the psyche of a serial killer. Couldn't hack it at college. Just doesn't fit in anywhere, but tries to really hard. And then he got a job with the BMV, which is the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, for anyone that's not in the country. And this is where the second irony is. You just gotta love irony. He was an auditor, and he was promoted because I'm sure being an auditor and being meticulous was like right up his alley. He probably loved it. And so in the Indianapolis Star, irony number one, he'd written up this report. It was election time, and they were trying to change the BMV over. I don't really care, but it's not important. Basically, he wrote a report, and it made the newspapers, and so did he. So he's like interviewed for the Indianapolis Star, which he used to work for, and he was basically saying that it wasn't going to be cost effective, and they were switching over how you get your, what you're charged for your registration for your license plate. The irony is that his license plate was why he ended up getting caught. Someone, which they'll come into the picture in a second, but they were looking for this Brian Stat guy that drove this blue Chevrolet. That's where most of the men were last seen with this guy. And so, as they're looking for Brian Stat, which was a fake name, they ran that, didn't find anything. A friend of one of the victims saw him and ran in and like took down the license plate. And so he was the irony, like literally, how stupid are you? That's why he just got really sloppy. He was also, so after he worked for the B&B, he went and opened Save-A-Lots, which are still around. I think they're more like grocery store types now. So the Save-A-Lot from back then was probably kind of like a Goodwill. If anyone's familiar with Goodwill, it's just like kind of thrift store, secondhand things. They opened two. He ran one and his wife ran the other. And there are? I thought so. I remember going to them. I haven't seen one like around where I live recently, but as a kid, I remember going all the time. Oh yeah, he was a fashionista. That's a good one. And so he liked to shop, and he ended up being a pretty serious hoarder. And they're just a mess. So these Save-A-Lots were kind of where he made his money. He ended up moving on up and ended up buying this really awesome house, which you can, I don't know, I need to look into it, but I think that you can go there now, and the property is said to be haunted. But as you can see, His first home was here. He liked to hang out in Broad Ripple and downtown. And they owned these two homes at the same time. And this is in like Westfield, right off of 31, Carmel, Westfield area. But his other home was in more the Westfield area, I believe. And here it is. And so he had this big old fancy house from his Save-A-Lot business, and this was his indoor pool, which by the end towards 1996, that was pretty much the only part of the house that was kept clean. Everything else was just one big hoarder house. His wife and kids ended up being gone quite a lot. Like, there was definitely, this was not like your normal marriage. They had one son and two daughters, and they were just pretty much a hot mess as a couple. Like, everybody says, it was kind of that. It seemed like as a family, they were they led a double life to me. I mean, she's in the papers all the time. She ended up following right in her mother-in-law's footsteps, and really kind of the psychology of how she gravitated towards Herb's mom was pretty evident. I mean, she basically did everything that I saw in the paper for Elizabeth. Juliana followed right in her footsteps and became a part of the same groups, took over as chairman of all the same groups, until it just got to be too much for the both of them. And then that's when the mask started to slip. And they started to kind of show their disgust for each other. And she would often go to the lake. Lake Wawasee is in the northern tip of Indiana. Like, you see how far away it is. Lake Wawasee is beautiful, and it was pretty fancy. Like, it, at least back then, like, I had some family members that had a I guess what we can kind of consider maybe like a condo out there. And yeah, it was pretty fancy. And so he basically, when the police came for the third time with Julie, and she liked to go by Julie, she didn't she didn't really they tried to search a couple times before. There was one victim, and I'm sure Crime will tell you about him. His last name was Goodlet, and his mother hired a private investigator, which I'm sure she will tell you about as well. And that was basically where the ball finally started to roll. And we're talking about a serial killer that killed from the 80s, from 1980 all the way until 1996, racking up anywhere between, I think it was like 14 and 21 victims, which is just ridiculous. And the pattern was recognized before he was even caught. The So these counties over here, it was Darke County in Ohio and Preble County in Ohio, along with Shelby County, Indiana, Hamilton, and Hancock were the victims. And you can see this red line here is along I-70. It extends all the way. And so there was a lot of murders on I-70, and these were the ones that they linked with him before they even knew his name. and they basically come together and said there's just no way that these are not all linked. And they all looked alike. They were all in the same age range. They were all gay men. A lot of them were prostitutes or had been arrested for prostitution, which my gut says they were probably not prostitutes, but because of the bigotry that went on in the country and especially in small town Indiana back then, just being gay was probably like a crime. And so they would probably charge them with prostitution just for being gay. I mean, it was quite ridiculous. I mean, you couldn't even wear an earring, literally. Like, I'm going to stop there because I have some like church things to say about it and how that's perpetuated out of the church, but I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to stop that. But, um, so yeah, in 1995 was when they finally like started linking these all together. Now, this was separate from the guy that ended up, um, so this story is weird. Like, it's weird. I believe it was his Goodlet's. They had hired a private investigator, and then like this private investigator started getting other people coming to him. Well, this one guy went to him and said, um, I think I know who this is. He took me home one night. He took me to this pool, and he had these mannequins. Yeah, you heard that right. Mannequins like around the pool, and had them all dressed up and stylish and mostly men. And what he went with him because he thought that he was the person that had been last seen with his friend. And so he went with him to try to find out if he could find his friend. His friend was missing. And so the story just gets really weird there for a minute because he goes, they're, hanging out by the pool. Herb, is wanting to play some autoerotic at first where, they're like jerking off and choking each other. And then they're, playing in the pool and whatnot. And so this guy like kind of goes along with all of this. Herb starts choking him and he realizes that Herb's going to kill him. So he plays dead and Herb thinks that he's dead and stops. And then he opens his eyes and Herb tried to like play it off. But the guy was like, at that point, he was like, I knew it was him. And he convinced him to take him back to his home. And Herb did. And so, but when he went to the police, he literally couldn't remember anything. I think he must have been like really drunk or something because he just remembered they drove north. That was basically it. And a sign that said farm. But he really had nothing else other than what they already knew about the guy. And so he's trying to explain this like huge farm to the police, and they're just like, we literally we need more, which I can't blame them. And so another guy in that area was the one, like someone saw him again, and that's when they wrote down his license plate. So these two, a private detective and then an Indianapolis police detective, they went to his house and were basically just trying to get him. Now, at this time, they were in the process of a divorce, and he lived at this. Whoop. At this home, which they still own. It's on 72nd Street, and they still own it. So there was some searches that they did there on all of his properties. But yeah. So he was living here. She was living out on the estate, the Fox Hollow Farm, with all the dead bodies, and he was living here at this house. Now, I did find another home that was registered to the mother, that was his mother, that was set to be demolished, and that's the other one that you see there, the Linden one. Like, I- I'm telling you what, like, if the police did not search this area, they need to, because it just, I don't know. I just have this feeling like there's bodies there. I don't know why, but the house, and this is downtown, and that's kind of why I wonder if he liked to go to Broad Ripple, which is right here, but he also picked up a lot of these men on downtown. And so with the where this home was, it just kind of, makes me think he um he could have gone back here. I don't know. But I do know that they did not find all of the body parts, because apparently he burned them, and basically, I mean, just so this is the property that I really wonder, because there's only 3 in the search warrants from the Freedom of Information Act that someone applied for the FBI, which you can find online. And this home was not mentioned in there, but in old records and through Ancestry and my case in the papers, this property was owned by his mother, and it was set to be demolished. So here's a house, and I'm assuming there was another house here. I don't know. This is a Winnebago or RV. I don't know what you guys call those. And this is a boat, and there's a truck, and there's tons of cars everywhere. And but the home was to be demolished, and that happened in 1995. And that's kind of why I wonder if he didn't use this one. He also liked to hang out with boys at the Save-A-Lots, and he actually called it Waco, which is kind of weird. But he called his little like hangout at work. So he had all these creepy little hangouts, especially that one with the freaking pool. I mean, that's just so smart. Dressing up mannequins, and he was lonely apparently, and so he wanted to have friends, and so he would just have these parties, and that's what he told the guy, that he had these parties because these mannequins, because he was just so lonely. And his wife was gone a lot, and every time she was gone to the lake, old Herb got busy being a serial killer. He was quite ridiculous. Mm. Yeah, Gacy was. There was a lot of similarities with Gacy. He didn't quite eat people, but like, it just seems like the lust killers really do kind of fit that same pattern. Basically, a lust killer is they're killing because they get a erotic sexual gratification out of killing, but it's usually not sated long, and their fantasies really evolve over time, because they're still trying to get that high that they got off of the first kill. And so every time his wife would go up to the lake, Herb would kill men and bring them back to one of his many places, mostly that pool. It was called the playpen. And he had a video camera in there. And when he was found in 1996, when Juliana finally agreed to let them come onto the property and search, and she only did that the third time because he had her son, and she was really getting kind of concerned. The papers had already even talked to him, and they were like, the police had already talked to him, and it was kind of like, what's the deal with this? That we have your license plate and we're trying to connect you. Do you know anything about this? And of course he's like, no, and he wouldn't consent to even be, he wouldn't let him even talk to him. So he basically just said no to everything they wanted to do. And his wife kept saying no as well, until finally he had her son and she was worried. And so she got her son back and was able to kind of like push all of that. They finally got Hamilton County. They just didn't even end up meeting them, because they never would. There basically was like, the judge was like, he's a prominent member of our, county, and we're not just, you need to have more than what you have, even though they had quite a bit. They were basically kind of protecting him. And what do you mean, it took one parent? Right. One parent. I know what you mean now, like a victim's parent. Like, yeah, it was quite ridiculous. And it's really sad that there were other parents, they wouldn't even let them report them missing. Um, there was really nothing other than when these other ones that are kind of outside of the home, of course, their bodies were found. Now, his home was not included in the 1995 linkage. That was more of like I-70 and the Shelby County and Darke County and Preble County. They were all naked. Nothing to identify them was left. They were strangled, and they were left by some body of water. He apparently had, you know, maybe his dream days at the lake house when he was little. I'm not sure, but he liked water. I haven't really dug into the psyche of that, because you've got the pool, you've got Lake Wawasee, and all the bodies were found by some type of body of water, or in water, or around water. It could have just been a coincidence, but I don't know. And whenever you are ready, crime, you can come on. I probably won't be able to do this. Well, but so that's kind of a discombobulated way of telling you about this guy. I probably should have wrote it all down and been a little bit more organized about it, but um, I was just kind of into it and just kind of went with it. I did send you one. I sent you two, actually. Did you get them? I have to send it to your email. I don't have Messenger on the computer. No football on yet. Well, thanks, eh? There she is.
Hey, hold on. I got to turn YouTube off.
Okay. How are
There you
you?
go. I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Hello, everybody. It is, hold on. Okay, so I am here and I'm going to do my best with this. I really had a lot of trouble. There was really one family member that actually brought on a investigator, but I wanted to start off with the victims' names. Now, I
Yeah.
have to tell you, after researching this for like 4 hours today, Mel, which was really good because, to tell you the truth, I had no idea about the guy who owns Save a Lot, and now I do. We have
Right.
Save a Lot here in Florida, so
Oh, you
it
do?
worked.
Okay.
I was like shocked.
Are they
I
grocery stores now?
Yes, they're grocery
Okay.
stores
That's what I
here.
thought. That's what I was thinking.
Yep. Yeah, they are grocery stores now. And so we have one in my town. So it's really
Oh,
cool.
that
But
is
I'm going
cool.
to start with calling off the victims' names.
Sure.
Now I have to tell you the research that I did, this gentleman, and I'm not even sure I want to call him that, but I will. Um, they he was a piece of work. And I, even though they only named, I kept looking and looking, they only named 11 people. There
Right.
is no way,
No,
excuse my
I agree.
language, in hell that he only killed 11 people.
No, I would
Um,
say closer to 21. Yeah, for sure.
and I think it's way more than that. I really do. I think that his wife, they were married 25 years and only had, how do I say this without getting you
No,
demonetized?
I'm not
They
gonna.
had, they did the fun stuff only 6 times, six
Right.
times in 25 years. Um, Obviously, 3 of those produced children.
Right.
So, but here are the victims. Only 8 of the victims could be identified. Johnny Bear, he was 20. Alan Wayne Broussard, he was 28. And we'll be talking about Broussard's mother here in just a little bit.
Yeah.
Roger Goodlett, Richard D. Hamilton. Oh, I'm sorry. Roger A. Goodlett was 33. Richard D. Hamilton was 20. Stephen S. Hale was 26. Jeff Allen Jones was 31. Michael Kieran was 46. Emmanuel Resendez was 31. Eric Roediger was never confirmed, even though they do have him mentioned.
Mm.
Um, they, I had a really difficult time finding information on the other families in this, but let me tell you why. Um, this was in Indiana, as you stated.
Mhm.
When the complaint came in, the first one with Brian, or no, there was one complaint before Brian, and they suspected that there were gay men going missing from that area, from that bar, actually.
Mhm.
This had been going on for the previous year. There was people going missing. They would report their loved one missing, but back in those days, because of diversity or lack thereof with the police department in Indiana, they
Mhm.
were turned away.
Right.
And they filed it, but they were not looked into because of they didn't want to make this public. Indiana did not want to be known as a place that had a gay bar and gay people that lived there. His choice of victims were all gay. As I read more about him and the difference in his behavior, especially growing up, he was diagnosed at a younger age with schizophrenia. And I don't know if you guys know this, but they will not diagnose schizophrenia until you're at least 20 years old. Even if you're hospitalized for it, they will call it like they diagnosed him when he was in the psych unit as multi-personality disorder. So basically it's schizo, okay?
Yeah.
But they call it anything but that. But these families were told to be hush hush about this, not to go to the media. The media didn't even get involved. And I could be wrong on this, Mel, but I think they didn't even get involved until almost 4 years after the investigation. Am I right? Or was it longer than that?
The local, so in June, on June 24th was when they got that search warrant finally. They basically went over Hamilton County's head, and that was in 1996.
Yes.
And the papers, they must have been retracted because they were all added into and everything was kind of compiled with the FBI. And so were those early articles. They were all in the FBI file, which is kind of a weird place to find newspaper articles, right?
Exactly. I had a really hard time finding the victims' names.
Right. And so
when you sent it to me, then I was able to look it up that way, but it was really a lot of scrambling. I was like, well, how am I going to get these victims' names when it's not even on here?
Right.
And my point was Indiana State Police, no offense to them, but they hid these crimes.
They did.
They hid them.
Yeah.
And
the papers,
it was like something you just did not talk about.
Yeah, they weren't buying it either, though.
Right.
That was what was in those papers, was basically they're like, well, he didn't do this. Like, he's a good member of our community, and he owns the Save-A-Lots, and he goes to church, blah, blah, blah. It's not Herb. We don't know why there's bodies out there, but it can't be him. And it took him a while to get on board. And so by July was when the first, of course, you know, it was all about the skeletons and the bones that they found, but not more so about her. But he committed suicide on July 3rd of 1996 in Canada, in Pioneer Park, Canada.
And he also had not to interrupt you, he also had the videotapes in the car with him.
Yeah, that was right. That was
he had those videotapes at that time when he was sleeping in the car, and then the police woke him up, and the policeman stated, I don't know what they call them in Canada. What are they called? What are the police called in Canada? I can't remember, but he noticed that the videotapes, I think they said there was like 12 or 13 that he had counted right there.
Right.
So they were 100% sure at this point that this guy had Mounties. There we go. They were 100% sure that he had videotaped his crimes, which this would have, on those videotapes, they would have gotten a name or at least a picture of all the people that he did, whether, because I guess he had his whole house with cameras.
Oh.
So
In the whole house?
in the pool house, yes.
Oh,
There
wow.
was cameras, and so he had videotaped them all. But I mean, they were saying there was over 1,500 bones they found in his backyard. And
Right.
that's way more when our body has, hold on, 200, is it 200 something bones? Don't quote me, but we have like 200. So you're talking 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That would be, but they were scattered everywhere. And so, but
Right.
when Alan Wayne Broussard's mom, I saw an interview with her, and her biggest concern was how did the wife not know about this? Their son had found a few of the bones, or one bone in the backyard, and then they pushed it off because he said it was his father's when he worked, and it was just from the lab. And
Mm.
then the wife, when not too much later, had found another bone in the
Mhm.
yard. And they were trying to tell, she denied that she knew anything. And I watched her interview and I did the body language.
Mm.
In my opinion, she knew. I
Wow.
think that is why she took the kids as much as she did away. I
Right.
think she knew what he was doing, but I think that she was in denial that, wow, he couldn't have done that. I mean, he's the father of my 3 children. I'm not sure she was the sharpest tool in the shed when it came to that. Um, and I apologize. I don't mean to be rude to this poor woman who is no longer here. But I think that when I watched her body language, when she was talking, she was looking down. Her eyes were down like this. That's total deception. But what I liked about Alan Wayne Broussard's mom is she did not take no from the police. She went and got um, a private investigator, and she wanted him to, investigate this on his own. They kept it quiet at first.
Right.
Uh, I have that information here, so give me just a minute because I did watch it. Um, Hold on. I have the investigator's name. Hold on a second. I highlighted it where it was. Um, Hold on. I have them here. That's Brian Smith. So before I jump to that, I do want to say that within, I think it was like 24 hours after that, no, 8 days. It took them 8 days to find him, but they
Mhm.
know he had committed suicide. He shot himself, but it
Right.
took them 8 days to find his body, but they never found the videotapes.
Yeah, probably in the
So,
bottom of the lake. He
yep,
went to a body of water to kill himself in
yeah,
Canada.
go figure.
And he wrote like a 3-page suicide note, but
Yep.
never mentioned the murders at all. He just kind of bellyached about his marriage and his failed businesses and all of his stuff. Like,
Yeah, they think he put him in the river before he he committed suicide. So,
mhm.
and his body was found 8 days later. Um, Okay, so that's the story of the haunted house, and I'll get to that, but I was trying to do the victims part of it. But this
Mhm.
mom um was incredible. She was not going to take no from them, and she was going, she hired the private investigator. So, and his name was it Vandegrift? Turned to police again, but this time he contacted Mary Wilson, a detective who worked in the missing persons um, department, and they went together out to the house.
Yeah, yeah.
But that, oh, here we go, 5,500 bone fragments and teeth.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a lot.
5,500. And when you think that we have right around under 300 in our body,
Mhm.
including our teeth, there's no way possible you would have that much and only have 11 victims. I do think that there was more at
I think
that
so
time.
too. Did I send
Yeah.
you the one paper about the vaults with the buried Saint
No,
Bernards? Oh,
no.
yeah. So it was strange that the address was redacted. So basically,
Yes.
Julie, she lived at this address. Now, it wasn't the Fox Hollow Farm, and it wasn't the one at 4421 East 75th Street. It was another one. And she consented at first, and then she like retracted it and took it back. And
Right.
so they wanted to search that property because their canines hit on it, and they knew that they had buried two vaults with these Saint. So they said these vaults only had these Saint Bernards in them buried. Like they were not buying it, and so
Right.
but they couldn't get a warrant for it. With all that they found out about this man, like they still couldn't get a warrant. They didn't have enough to get a warrant to search this property. Makes me
And the
wonder if it
wife
was ever searched.
refused them. The
Right.
wife refused them. I mean, why would
Weird.
you, if you have nothing to hide, why refuse?
Yeah. Right. It's weird.
It was just, this is one of those strange stories. It really is.
Isn't
Um,
it so weird? It's so
it
weird.
it was so being, they wanted to call him the I-70 serial killer. And
He
I
looks
mean,
like that sketch.
yeah, I think that's like the minimum. But so there's that. Yeah, the suicide note. What you got too? Yeah. Um, and actually, the um, even after all of this investigation, um, the new owners, and they had a renter in a separate apartment since that house is like a mansion.
Right.
They found more bones. There's still bones out there. It's the
Mm-hmm.
craziest thing. It definitely
It was bizarre. They're just like, yeah, your
it
pal
was.
bones. Like that
And
was
I know you want me to get into the victims, but I got their names, but I really had a hard time finding things
yeah.
on this. It was almost like they sealed documents.
Right. There was articles where they didn't want to talk. Like there was only about 2 to 3 families that actually even wanted to talk. Oh, sorry. How do I do that?
Click on Truth and Justice
There.
first. It'll take it down.
Gotcha.
There you go. Um, But yeah, this guy, even when he was younger, there was definitely something seriously wrong with him. He
Mhm.
would fantasize about drinking urine, and he peed on the teacher's desk. I heard you say that, but
Mhm.
wow. And I do feel that he was, I think he was fighting the fact that he was gay. And I think he just drove himself crazy and just kept, he didn't know back in those days, it wasn't public. Plus, he was married, he was established in his community. Um, and I think, in my opinion, because this case in Indiana was hidden, I think that there was more to that than what Indiana State Police would
Right.
say.
Yeah.
They pretty much hid it. It was just that one mom that hired the private investigator to look into it that
Yeah.
became they had to look at it. They didn't have a choice because they found more evidence. And so at that point, they couldn't hide it anymore.
Right. I mean, they literally had no choice. The papers had no choice, and the
The media,
investigator,
once
like,
they got it. And I think that that mom went to the media, but the mom of him, I watched her interview and it was short. There wasn't
mhm.
much to it. But she did state, how could that wife not know
Right.
that there was something wrong? But my first clue that she did know was she would take those kids away, like for long periods of time.
Yeah, right. It was a whole
And
summer.
that's when he would do the killings. It's almost
Mhm.
like, take the kids, I need my fix. I didn't
Right.
say it like that, but
Yeah, no, I mean, it was weird, and those were the months that he killed in, but the one of the other ironies is that he was, like, said to have been a great dad. Like,
yeah.
he was like a family man, and he stayed home with the kids, which would have been super odd for that time. But yeah, he
Right.
loved kids, doted on them, spoiled them. Um,
And
like
that's why,
everything was about appearances though. In their house,
right,
like
right.
outside, like it started to fall in on itself just like they did. Like their whole life literally imploded. It's discussed by
I I feel like they misdiagnosed him. I don't think he was
no, I don't either.
you could not plan if he was on medications, maybe.
Mhm.
But a person that has that, he just from a young age had a deranged kind of mind.
Right, and I was
Because
saying about the, McDonald's triad, yeah, there is that. It's bedwetting, um, torturing animals, and starting fires. Now,
yes,
there are recent studies that are starting to kinda come out that are refuting that, and they kinda make sense. So,
yes,
not it's like when you take those IQ tests, like, not all serial killers are bedwetters, and not all bedwetters are that, like, how you can do that,
right,
the a part of
right.
I don't remember what it's called, but this is a part of IQ tests. Oh, she went away. Where'd she go? Hopefully she'll come back. But yeah, Dennis Rader, what an asshole. Ugh. He I don't like him. Yeah, McDonald. It's basically just something that they tried to put together when they were trying to find patterns, and that was kind of the pattern. Now, he did have crazy things with animals. Like, he was on the news a couple times. He was in the papers a couple times and on the news where he had found, like, where the people, I don't know what they use, those like machines to run the lines down the middle of the road. And so they had run the line over a yellow line over this raccoon. And so he got out and like took a picture of it. Okay, Chris. I don't know if I got it, but, oh, you are. She's back. She's back like Cher. But yeah, I don't know. He did have the crow thing, and he seemed to have some of that, but again, I think it's all.
I do too. I think that the Indiana State Police botched this case. And I think that these families deserve more, since I'm being the victim advocate here. I think these families deserved justice even now. Like,
Mhm.
you know, acknowledge that you wanted to hide this back then, you know? I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's all. The one mom that I saw interviewed, that's what she wanted. You know, she wanted everybody to know how great her son was.
Right.
And she was not able to do that with the media. She was basically told not to say anything.
Yeah.
Sound a little bit familiar? What's going
Why
on
not?
in Indiana, guys?
Right. I mean, what year
It's,
is it
you
now? I
know,
mean, it's the same.
I have to tell you though, I grew up in a smaller town, and I was 19 when I moved to Chicago. And that was the very first time I had seen two people, two gay men, holding hands and hugging. And I would have to tell you, it was a culture shock. So if you're not used to it, it was really a surprise. I
Mhm.
was like, what did I just see? What I mean, I looked. It was one of those. Did I just see what I thought I saw? Because I
Right.
weren't educated about it. So you're talking about
Yeah, I
older
was. Mhm.
ISP, and they it's smaller towns. So I am being an advocate a little bit for them.
Right.
I'll give them just
Probably
that
why I
little.
gravitated towards it, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not changed much in rural Indiana in 2020, from
It's just not
1989, not 1996. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's because that's the year I graduated. It doesn't feel like that long ago. And it just
no, it
seems like we
doesn't.
should have, but when you think of how many years that is, it seems like we should got a little bit farther than we have. And it makes me really
Right.
sad that there's aspects of this case from the 80s and 90s that is so similar still with Ray.
Yes.
And the stigma that comes with homosexuality in small town America is just getting to the point where it's just beyond ridiculous. Just do your job without a bias. You
It,
know, I
exactly.
don't understand what's so hard about that.
And they so after I had studied this case a little bit, and after you sent me some of the information, I tried to find his children. You can't even search for his children.
Oh, really?
No, I had trouble finding, and I'm sure it's for their protection, but because he had two girls and a boy, the girls could have married and have different last names. So I kind of put that there. But normally, if you have a family member, a parent, there's a 50-50 chance that that child could also have psychiatric That's coming out in the new studies now. They're raising those statistics. They were
Right.
much lower back in the 90s, and now they're coming to realize that, you know, the they have he could have the gene, and maybe if he was in a motorcycle accident, hit his head, and it throws off the chemistry,
Mhm.
they're beginning to see that that can affect
Right.
the behaviors in that person. So, but it's really sad about these victims, and that it took me 2 hours just to find the names
Mhm.
is really sad to me. And
Yeah.
the only mom who spoke out was that one. And
And
she actually hired the private investigator, and she finally went against ISP and said, "Hey, you can
mhm.
keep it quiet as long as you want, but I'm done keeping it quiet.
Right.
I want my son's story out there."
And thank God for that dogged, I mean, he was very dogged about he was like a dog with a bone. He was not gonna let it go, the private investigator. And you had
Exactly.
one woman detective that was going to solve this. It was it was right in front of their faces for
Right.
16 years. That's what's so upsetting. You
Right.
have you have a prominent family that you know is from Ohio. They all still live there. And all of these count like he wasn't very smart. He was not organized in the least. And he
Right.
I mean, he didn't even change his license plate
No,
on the
he
same
couldn't keep
car.
a job. He couldn't
Could
keep a job for more than, I mean, because his wife was in on that Save a Lot is the only
Right.
reason that I think that he stayed in it as long as he did.
Right.
They also, I mean, there was a couple of times that he was arrested. He had charges filed
Right.
for, do you guys call them DUIs there? Drinking
Yeah.
under intoxic. Okay.
I mean,
He
that's
had
what
like,
he used to be called.
he had one of those. He served some jail time.
Herb
Uh,
did?
yep.
Hmm.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me find that story. You keep talking. And Ivy, the
Oh, yeah,
disorder
Ivy.
I'm talking about is bipolar. Bipolar's a big one that they're saying if one parent has it, that
Mhm.
there's a 50-50 chance that the child are they carry the gene. And if something traumatic happens in their life, if they get overly stressed, and they may show signs like OCD, ADD, ADHD. Sound familiar, guys?
Mhm.
Um, a lot of our kids are getting diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, and they're being misdiagnosed
Right.
because doctors will not diagnose serious, like bipolar disorder, psychosis, schizophrenia.
Right.
They do not have the ability to diagnose it in those young children. They can see that the child is disturbed,
Mhm.
and they have to put a title to
Isn't it more not about, like, not labeling children with serious mental illness at a young age?
it.
But
It is. It's a they're starting to change that now. My son, when he was in the psych unit at 7 years old, it took 5 firemen to get him in an ambulance at 7 years old.
wow.
Um, when he was put in the psych unit, they said he was one of the youngest kids they had ever diagnosed as bipolar, and that he suffered from bipolar disorder. Um, and that was at a big children's hospital in Denver.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes,
I
Ivy
know
Rose.
from my, I'll put another comment up there. Chris
No,
won't
you're
mind.
good. And she's right. And they're
Oh,
saying,
it's one of hers. But I did the 23andMe for myself and my daughter because she has a rare genetic syndrome. And so it was like a 6-month wait to get in with a geneticist because the genetic tests are not advanced enough on this particular col chromosome to map it out yet. And so it's basically more of a nosology that they apply than it is the genetic testing, even the micro and macro array. So I went and did the 23andMe, and it was pretty crazy how it has a psychiatric, all of the genes, the GWAS has done, and others like them have done an incredible job of researching outside of the norm of where we are used to seeing research done. And now we're seeing that applied to criminal investigations. So that's just really cool that they're just like, no, we're just going to pass you right on up. I mean, you're just not advancing enough system. And so they just kind of come right over top of them. But yeah, there is definitely a link between bipolar, OCD. I would say he's OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder.
I think so too.
The meticulousness, but only in certain areas, because his lawyer had said he was like a scaredy cat. He was a very mild-mannered man who was scared of confrontation. He didn't like, so that was another one of the ironies of him. Like, he came across as like a big chicken, like a big scaredy cat. But yet, so he had all of these facets of him, and you really see that with people with OCD, because I know, because I have it. And
Yes.
it's phobias. So you may be a hoarder and have serious OCD. You also may
Right.
have a minimal amount of things in your home because you're a germaphobe and you don't like things. So you can be like the polar opposite of that. And those phobias are more driven by, they're not sensical, like they're not rational at all. And so they don't really make sense in real life. Like my swinophobia. I mean, it makes no sense. Like, I'm not afraid of a snake or like a bear, but I'm terrified of a pig. I know that doesn't make sense, but rationale gets overshadowed by emotions. And I think that he was so scared to be himself, and it was all about a facade, that
Yes.
he ended up just imploding over time. Like, he couldn't take the fake life. Yet he was killing for 16 years. That's sad. And it's only because of who he targeted.
Exactly. He targeted gay men. And
The system is why we have serial killers.
that's right.
The
And
system
I
is why we
agree
have
very much. They could have put they could have saved a lot of these guys' lives
them. Right.
if they would have taken this seriously from the beginning. But because they didn't acknowledge the gay people as
Mm-hmm.
valuable enough, and notice I'm not offending anybody. I I have a nephew who is gay, and I have no problems with it. It
Hold on
is
a
not.
second. Chris, like, I'm literally covering the case that you wanted me to cover, and you're like talking about all kinds of other stuff. What's the deal, dude? Like, I
Poor
am
Chris.
like, have to pause to take a second here because
I know. Well,
you're
did you see
literally
what I put
talking
up there?
about it.
Well, I just told Chris, I said, can we stay on topic, please? Squirrels get confused doing more than one case at a time.
Right.
And I'm a squirrel. Say squirrel, and I can move the other way. So I
Yeah.
just, it makes it easier, Chris. I'm not being mean or anything. It's just really hard when I'm sitting here trying to make sure I get the information to you guys. So
you sent me one and I said, "Oh, then you'll like tomorrow because we're gonna be discussing that." The I-70 killer stuff.
Yes.
He's the one that they think is the I-70 killer. You sent
I'm
me
really excited. I actually did some of the research on that. So I really do think that he may be that. His MO was for sexual gratification.
Mhm.
So I could be wrong. I could very well be wrong. But and
Well,
can I just answer Ivy Rose real quick? Back up, Ivy. You were saying that they're now diagnosing them younger, and they are.
yeah.
But what's happening is they're misdiagnosing. When they're saying a child is bipolar when it's actually
Mhm.
OCD or AD, attention deficit disorder. They just made, hey, Chris, I'm
Right.
used to that and I love it. I think it's great. I love that you told us that. Um, and I knew that you did, and so that's why I'm trying to be nice about it. But I'm my son is the same way. He'll be like, "Okay, let's do this." Okay, well, and I'm over here and we're doing this, and then
Mhm.
yes, Chris. So that has to affect you somehow. Um, and I know my son has had concussions also. And
Mhm.
and I will tell you, we have the reason that I did the study on the brain. We went to at the time when my son was when we got him out of the hospital, he was probably I think he was about 8 years old. He went to outpatient, so he went to school there for 6 months. So
Mm.
during the, we would drop him off and then come back and get him at night. But he was probably about 8 years old, and I took him to Ohio, of all places, guys.
Mhm.
There was, this is before the PET scan, the positive, uh, it's called the PET scan. Do you know that with the PET scan, they can actually diagnose now where the brain injury is, what
Mhm.
type of um, do you have, depending on what the brain tissue looks like, the pathways. It's almost like they cut open half the brain and they look inside, and they
Yeah.
can say, okay, there's scar tissue here. That's and that's why I did so much research on the brain over the years, is because
Mhm.
I wanted to understand my son better.
Right.
My oldest son is now 20, he'll be 22 this year, next year. And he played soccer since he was 5 years old. He's had many concussions.
Mhm.
He, until he was 19, he did not struggle with um, anxiety. And all of a sudden, he just started having issues and they linked it to his concussions. So that's what made me think that, Chris. So,
Right. And
but
actually, I had a doctor ask me if I had ever been diagnosed with Asperger's. Um,
I think we all have a little bit of
I
Asperger's in us.
yeah, and I was like, no, I was sent to a place where they would diagnose me when I was really young. Like they knew there was just something different. There's just something different about Mel. That sounds kind of creepy.
Right.
But it ended up being the dyslexia and ADHD.
Okay.
Um, and OCD came later,
Okay.
but and anxiety and phobic disorder. But that was another thing about Herb. He was never medicated. Like it was
Right.
such a scarlet letter that you kind of got to wonder, did he kill these people to keep them close to him? I mean, he had the mannequins.
I and he had a deranged way of thinking. When
Well,
I look at it at the behavior side, I
right.
feel like he felt like he was missing something. And like you said, he was a loner. He didn't have many friends, and maybe that was his comfort, was to kill them. But if you think about it, he had to do more than just kill them. He had to do something, maybe chopping up a little bit of the bodies because it was spread all around.
Well, they said that the archaeologists and anthropologists they had out there said that they didn't find any cutting marks, but that they were burned, and they couldn't tell if they were burned before they were dead or after. That was in the very beginning. And this was before like the investigation really took off. That's
Right.
all.
And I did read that. I suspect that he did
Right.
do that.
They dragged it out. Like it was from, they started kind of investigating this before they knew who he was, which was like the furthest I found was like 1995, a little bit in
Yes.
94, 95.
Okay.
So basically 15 years, they finally started putting these together, which is just ridiculous. But anyways, um, what was that? I always do that.
Squirrel.
Squirrel. Yeah. I mean, my brain it just goes. Then it's gone. But
Right.
when it comes
Now,
back, then I have
I
to say it. So I think that's probably why they thought that I might have Asperger's. Plus, I have a lot of like issues with like things like touch and sound, smell, taste, touch. I
you
don't
could
like
be
things.
on the Asperger spectrum and be the high functioning.
Yeah, I would, after I started researching it because I didn't really know much about Asperger's at that time. I was like, yeah, I mean, it does kind of fit a little bit. And I even asked my psychiatrist about it, and we talked about it. But yeah, I can relate to Chris, so that makes sense. And I feel like a lot of times people don't.
Right.
I lose
Right.
out
And
on like the emotional or like all this YouTube stuff. I don't know about if you can tell me if this is kind of something with your son, but it's just like I don't understand it. I feel like I'm playing a game that I'm like don't even get. Like I'm put in
right.
the
It's
middle
the
of like
basics. Sometimes it's the simplest thing, and it may be very simple, but very hard for you to do and very hard. And
this.
we say that about my son. Like, he can take a computer apart, all the little pieces, and put
Right.
them all right back together.
Right.
But ask him to go in and cook something, and he looks at you like, well, how do I do that?
Mhm.
I'm like, are you kidding me? You open a can, you put it in a bowl, and I mean, but and I think it's made me more sensitive. I have always been, when I was younger, I always wanted to be a nurse, and I
Mhm.
wanted to work with the brain. I wanted to work with people that had brain injury, and um, because I think the brain, they really don't understand it. Our brain does amazing things. One of the parts of the brain that was affected during delivery for my son it's called the cerebellum.
Mhm.
And back there, it controls your motor skills.
Mhm.
So we couldn't figure out, well, what the heck? So when we went and got this PET scan, it showed on there that the damage was there, and he had like two other places that were damaged, and it just shows dead tissue. It comes up really bright gray.
Mhm.
And that was one of the best tests we ever did for my kid. And that doctor was so smart. I mean, he helped us understand um, certain things. Like, my son sometimes he has trouble breathing
Mhm.
when he's sleeping. And that's because part of the brain that controls the autonomic system, the autonomic parts, which is you breathing, blinking, heart rate, your lungs, if that is injured, your body's going to forget, or your body, it's not going to work right. And that's why we had to have my son on monitors so much, on heart monitors, because his heart would stop, or he would stop breathing as an infant. And it, so part of the interest of the brain when he was younger was the damage part. Now I'm looking at, as he's older, we're in a whole new world. We're in a adult brain that is not functioning, or how they actually just came out in the autism community, and they may have found a gene. And if you are missing that gene, they're linking it to autism. And they no longer call it Asperger's. It is in the, and Ivy Rose might know this, but is it the PDOS? And that is the diagnosis book. I can't remember, but they just came out and did about this gene, and they're starting to look for it now. Of course, it's like really expensive, but I really do feel that he was at a disadvantage as a child because he showed tendencies when he was younger, especially with animals. He showed these tendencies to be not so gentle with them. Let's say that, you know? And I feel like the same with the dog. Like a dog got, and there was one part, did you read when a dog had gotten hit by a car or something and he just killed it? And to him, and that was when he was younger and his friend witnessed him do it. Yes, DSM. So they're no longer, but I do think he was at a disadvantage. If he would have been treated when he was younger, I'm not, he would have been, he still would have been gay. Okay. Which he had a feminine side to him. So I do feel that eventually they're going to have to see that it is genetics and genetic related, some of these diagnoses. And when I started checking out into the brain stuff, as he got older, we started dealing with, especially when he got diagnosed with bipolar. My mother is manic depressive. Let's just say she's got about 3 diagnoses. And it concerned me because I started showing not evil tendencies or anything, but not able to handle my life. I was just overwhelmed. I can get very overwhelmed. I take on too much and then I get overwhelmed by it. And then I just shut down. And my husband knows it, my kids know it, and they always tell me, you're taking on too much. We know what happens. And then I'm not really good at handling that for another week. I shut down for a week and then I'm back up again. But the brain is definitely, but I do, I wish, especially his dad being a doctor, his dad had to know and just pushed it aside.
Probably, yeah, that's what I mean. Like he was an anesthesiologist, so he probably could push his weight around, but he probably still had a very basic understanding of the human mind and psychology. And it's called epigenetics, is like where your genes, you can have genes that are they're influenced by your environment, and so that's where epigenetics plays a huge role in our health, our mind, our tendencies, and all of that. So,
Yeah, it isn't it intriguing? We're probably overwhelming some people, but it's very intriguing to learn how the brain works and those pathways, teaching the brain um, with autism. When you go for occupational therapy
mhm,
and physical therapy, they are retraining your brain. They're developing, and the younger you are, the better it is. They're
right.
making new pathways. Like the way this specialist told us is typically our brains, or I shouldn't say ours, because I don't qualify for this, but people that are normal, they go from A to B to C. That's how the signal goes. When you see people with deficits, and I'm going to put it just like that, deficits in the brain, the
Mhm,
pathway goes from A to C. And so, what the therapies do is they are developing that pathway back. So then it could be A, B, and C again, but it's just directed differently in the brain.
okay.
There's a positive between, yes,
Uh,
you're
yes,
very intelligent.
there's a few different I-70 um, killers. One targets women, and the other one targeted men. And so Baumeister is the one that they suspect that was the man that he targeted men. And then Ivy, absolutely. If you look at studies with, I mean, just on serial killers alone, the amount of high IQs amongst serial killers or people with serious mental illnesses or end up having a psychotic break later in life,
Yes.
geniuses are, you know, it's like your brain can't it can you can only be given so much. And so when it's not all even to where you don't have a high intelligence, you don't have a low intelligence, you have a normal amount of emotional EQ and IQ and all of that.
Yes.
But when that's off, you get these beautiful minds that end up imploding in on their own selves, and they become their what that's why the ironies are there in this kind of behavior. And yeah, most of the like that list that I had a couple I don't know, it's probably months ago now, a couple Sundays ago, was listing all of the IQs of different serial killers like Ed Kemper, Jeffrey Dahmer, um,
We should do that one night.
Alcala. Like they all had really high IQs.
Right.
um, Berkowitz, no, not Berkowitz, Kaczynski. I mean, like all of them, Bundy, Rader. His was actually kind of low, which makes sense because he was just an asshole. But I can't stand him. He is a serial killer that I don't even like to like. Every time I hear his name, like I get that pops up that's his face and those glasses, and it's just like he looks like just the devil.
Yes.
I don't know how they didn't see it with him because I can't even look at a picture of him. It just makes me
I
instantly angry.
Yeah, I do believe that there are people that are really have um how do I say this? I got to be very careful in my choice of words, but slower minds. And there are in the back in the 60s they diagnosed people with mental illness. They just called it mental illness, mental slowness. Now they call it pervasive development disorder, which means that you're slower and your brain's not working as fast. And so there are different um, things for that. Um,
I just bet that a lot of these serial killers are going to have an event in their life and it may be insignificant to someone else. And it's probably stems in childhood and it is going to be a obsession. That memory is just that's why they get these signatures. And
Yes.
I guarantee you with Herb, his is going to have to do with his dad and water. Like, I think that's kind of a given. And
Right.
that's where his obsession started. And yes, I understand what you're saying, Ange. Like, a beautiful mind would be, it's an oxymoron though, because you just have this. They do have a beautiful mind, but yet they also have the predisposition to be a psycho. So, and I do think it is predisposition. There's a lot of studies out on the brain and mapping of the brain, and actually one of the best, um, you probably heard of him, the guy, the neurosurgeon, and I will botch his name, but he ended up finding out that he was a psychopath through his own study. You know what I'm talking about? He
Oh,
studied
sorry.
serial killers and everything.
Yes. Yes. Sorry
Yeah,
about that. I was reading Joy's.
but
Do you think those are leftover genes or new genes? I don't think they're any genes. I think that we're born with half our mom's genes and half our dad's genes. And it depends who takes the lead. Genetics it's so complicated. And we went through a lot of genetic testing, and it is not cheap, and it is not a quick thing. I mean, there was one test they did on my son, uh, and it took almost 6 months to get the results back.
mhm,
6 months.
I know.
And yeah, I know
$14,000.
you know.
I know.
Yeah.
And my daughter has dysautonomia as well, so I understand
Oh,
exactly what
really?
you're talking
Okay,
about.
so you know that.
Oh,
Yeah.
inside and out. That's what most of her problems kind of stem from, is the
Oh,
dysautonomia.
yep.
And there's really not a lot they can really do for it. I mean, she has a series in
No.
her spine, in her spinal fluid. So it's basically like,
Okay.
drink some water and make sure your salt levels stay good and your water
Right.
stays above your body weight.
And
Like,
it's good for magnesium and zinc in your body, but always check with your doctor first.
mhm,
Um, and because of that very reason, Joy, we have chemicals in our food that are altering DNAs. And I believe it. Our foods are not, if you think about it, our parents, the grandparents back in their days, they cooked from scratch. They used healthy vegetables. They weren't cooking out of boxes. Bye, Angie.
and
Yeah, I hope you feel better. Um, but we cook out of boxes now. The best way that you can help your body is to eat
mhm,
fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh, and that's why they tell you, even though it's on the pyramid, grains, they're
mhm,
not very good for you. They
no,
they have a lot of carbohydrates.
right,
But that doesn't mean you can't eat some. It's just, watch how much you're eating.
mhm,
But they have the microwave meals now. They're By the time they dry those all out, I and send them to you, and they're in the freezer at the store,
mhm,
and you bring them home and you cook them, there's probably zero nutritional value there.
right, right. And I think
So,
when you pile, it's like, imagine it as you're piling bad bricks on top of yourself, and then we're like surprised when we find that the weight is too heavy, and those bricks
yes.
end up crushing us. So you have vaccines. I'm not going to change my mind on that. They have preservatives in them. They have things that do not belong in the human body, so therefore they are foreign. And then you have GMOs and preservatives in our food. I mean,
Yes.
my brother had a box of Frosted Flakes, the kind where they're like they're supposed to be, what do you call those? See, this is where my mind just goes. You keep them and they're worth money later on, like collectors items. And so he had this box. Well, my mom took it over to him because it's his, and he didn't realize that it was the one that he's had for 20 years. So he was eating, it was Wheaties, not Frosted Flakes. And so he was eating these Wheaties all week that were 20 years old, and they were just as fresh. Like, he didn't even know the difference. So that's not healthy, that you can have a food that shelf life is 20 years.
Right.
And so when you pile up the environment and our exposures and everything, that's where we're seeing it's not just one thing, it's all of those things. The antibiotics and the metals and GMOs, genetically modified, all of that is what's
Right.
causing all of what we're seeing in the world. And everyone's
That's right.
kind of like, well, why? Well,
Our
duh.
bodies weren't meant to have that. They're not meant to have the GMOs. And I do agree about the you know, I've done a lot of research, a lot. And I do have people ask me, what do you think? I mean, I always go back to when I was pregnant and I'm like, I exercised, I ate right. I mean, we cooked meals, fresh meals, um and I always thought back, I'm like, wow, that's just so weird. But he didn't show signs of it
Mm-hmm.
until after his shots. And back when my son was younger, they still had that it's thermosol. What do they call that? The mercury. The
Chimeras.
mercury. And I do feel, and we're having even more kids now. I mean, I work it every day
Mm-hmm.
that are affected. I do think that there are farms out there, um, and there are farms out there where they do not inject the animals. It is illegal in some states now to
Right.
inject those animals. And when you're talking about the milk, uh, a lot of people have dairy insensitivities, and a lot of that is from the GMOs. And,
Right.
it's just simple. A, they can link back MS, lupus, a lot of things to inflammation. We're eating foods that are making us inside inflamed and
Right.
irritated, and that is what's causing some of the diseases we're seeing now. I call it a disease, and again, I have MS. I think it's a disease. I think that um and I'm not the skinniest person on the block either.
I have
But
one for you. I have one for you. Okay, so I'm I am OCD, so remember that. Like, I have major problems. So the fact that I was able to switch was my aunt had to basically prove to me that the test was legit, but it's called Norwex, and it's
yeah,
just rags with silver in them that you can use for cleaning, like colloidal silver, which is what they use in hospitals to disinfect things. Life changer. Oh my gosh. So I don't use any like harsh chemicals, which that's again, I'm an oxymoron because I smoke, but I don't do all these other things, but yet I smoke. So it's just nonsensical, but you do what you can and then have a couple
yeah,
bricks. Have a couple bricks, but try not to have all the bricks. But also the methylation cycle in the body is hugely affected, like MTHFR, the mutations, and heterozygous as well as homogeneous.
sorry.
Um, are affected in autism and different behavioral disorders of the brain. And so we are seeing an increase in that because those genes that are triggered by epigenetics are now getting turned on, or they're getting turned off based on our environment. And so,
Right. Right.
I just,
And I actually, Ivy Rose, I can email you. I use a company that has all natural products. It's not for everybody, but I also, um, I grew up with vinegar and water in a bottle,
mhm,
and vinegar kills everything. It's just as good as Clorox. And I tried to do it at school and was told, nope, you have to use the Clorox at school. I'm like,
mhm,
it does the exact same thing that the Clorox, it will kill. I do add a little bit of lemon to my vinegar. Um, just my family hates the smell of vinegar around the house. I'm like, I don't care. It's natural. You're not going to get stuff from it.
mhm.
To kill bugs, small bugs around your house, if you have spiders, ants, anything,
Oh
spray a
yeah.
little bit of peppermint around the edges and it
Mhm.
suffocates them. I learned a lot. My sister's an aromatherapist, and so um, I used to be a lot healthier than I am now, but I'm also working a lot. And when you work a lot, you got to
Right.
keep that energy up. And especially with the MS, I have to. And right now, especially with flu season, I'm more worried about flu than I am the other one, because I get really sick. It downs me for almost 2 weeks.
Right.
And I end up losing about 8 pounds in the process,
Ooh.
just from having the flu. So I like to, I'm like Santa Claus. I bulk up, and then when the flu season comes, I can go back to normal. But I do want to, hey, Joy, cows don't drink milk, sweetie. They get grain, they get wheat or hay. They don't drink their milk. They can, but they drink water and grain. Am I right? Because she said,
Yeah. They don't
I'm
drink.
not arguing with you. I'm just, they don't drink their own milk.
No, they don't
That
drink
milk,
milk.
that milk comes
Water.
to us, but the reason they're giving the animals that is supply and demand. Think about it. We demand so much. Oh, baby cows. Yes. Okay. Baby cows do drink milk, but not full grown mama cows.
Mm.
Yes. You are right, Joy. We all have milk when we're babies, because that's the only thing our bodies couldn't handle if we came out and we got
Mhm.
corn on the cob right away.
Right.
Right. Yeah, the calves do.
We used goat's milk. See, I grew up in a health food store. My dad was an iridologist, among other things, and they ran a health food store out of our home that we were also homeschooled in. So it was really cool.
Yeah. And A West, the autism, if you guys want to know, it is up. Um they are now, the statistics have changed. Earlier in 2020, um now they're saying out of 100 kids, 40% of those are going to have, or more, possibly are, have autism. And
Hmm.
the number used to be closer to 20%. So the
Right.
numbers are showing that it's higher. It is definitely higher. I do a lot of research with autism. I try not to go too deep into the autism, because then you get those people, and I'm not going to say her name. She wrote a book and complained saying, oh, my child has autism because of the food and the shots and all of that. And she swore up and down. And 2 years later, they diagnosed. diagnosed her child with something totally different. Jenny McCarthy, I'll say it. She really wreaked havoc on the autism community and really had people turning their heads away on dealing with people with autism and families, and because she was blaming everybody and their mother for her son, who, by the way, ended up being a genetic disorder that ran on her side of the family.
Hmm.
So, and we all know, I think that is.
Some people think that.
No, A West. Autism was almost non-existent in the 60s. The statistics very early on were only like 5% of people.
Mhm.
5%. And we are in the like 80s and 90s, we were sitting right around 15 to 20%. Now it's going up to 40%. It has a lot to do with the environment. The
Mhm.
environment, the foods we eat, what they put on the foods. You know, a big thing you can do when you're eating fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, wash it off with water
Right.
before you eat it. That gets the pesticide if they use it. Um, and don't waste your money on organic, because just because it says organic does not mean it's organic.
Well, you can usually tell.
And unless you go to the farmer's market. Now, we
Right.
like to go to the farmer's market, or we grow our own in our backyard. You can start your own backyard garden, guys. I would recommend that for everybody. Grow tomatoes, grow those beans. I mean, you can do it.
What become a diagnosis?
Huh? Oh,
Did it become a diagnosis?
yeah.
Not until the 90s, wasn't it? The late 90s, like with.
Late 90s. My son was born in 99. And even then, it was so new.
Mhm.
With the statistics, my son didn't even get diagnosed till he was 8 years old with autism, until he had that PET scan. They thought all along it was something totally different and had diagnosed him with
Mhm.
something different, but the PET scans can show now. And now, as you notice, PET scans are becoming more available to people. They back when my son did it, it cost us $1,500, and that was just for the brain. And the test took 10 minutes.
Right.
So
But yeah, it is.
I
I mean,
just,
with
I'm not
everything,
saying people back then did
stigmatism.
not have autism. What I'm saying is the numbers show that later in the 90s and in 2000s, that's when you started seeing the numbers going up. For Joy is hilarious.
Yeah. But she's right about the milk. I mean, everyone's always like, drink your milk, you get your vitamin D and your calcium. And it's like, not
Yeah.
really. I grew up on goat's milk, and my children didn't drink milk. They still don't. None of us
Yeah.
really do, except for, like Oreos.
Goat's milk is supposed to be super, super healthy for you, but I just can't do it. That poor goat. I can't.
I like
I want
I don't mind
I
goat's
want
milk.
fainting goats in my backyard though.
Yeah.
I love
Well, I mean,
fainting
a goat,
goats.
it's not about necessarily milking it. It's just making sure that you put the animals first, and taking
Yes.
care of them.
Right, right.
And
And what do you guys think farmers do? That's our problem right now, is the farmers are really struggling right now. Number one, the weather. Are you laughing?
oh, Chris, he cracks me up.
He's funny.
I'm just listening.
Chris, you're really funny, dude.
And in Indiana, there are still, I don't know what you would call them because I call them cults, but they are like back to the crime stuff, with
Yes.
homosexuality, to where it's these different camps and facilities that you can go to get rid of your disease of being a homosexual. Because in a lot of people's minds, it is a like a something that you need to get cured. You need to be cured of that. And I think
You
with
know who's big into that, right? Are like LDS communities. They will. Where do you think they sent Josh Duggar?
right.
They
Yeah.
send them and they try to brainwash and literally get that out of their, like, they can change when you have an addiction like that.
And see, I think of it as, yes, you see that in FLDS, LDS. They just don't hide it as well as the other religious sects. They don't
Right.
hide it well because in the Baptist church, it is a thing, and
Yes,
it
very
is
bad.
child abuse. It's child abuse is what it is, and they
I
hide
agree.
behind the Bible and their interpretation of the Bible, but it is widespread inside of religion. The stigmatisms and the things that are right and wrong, like wars, have mostly centered around something to do with religion. For how, I mean, we're not learning anything. So it's not, to me, I hate it when people just like single out LDS. I'm not saying that you are. I know you know about all the other ones too, but like,
Oh, yeah. No. And I
kind of
was corrected. I was
about
just saying it all in one sentence.
right. They're just
And
kind of
basically the radical Christians, the radical religions is pretty much how I meant to say it, but it didn't come out that way.
radicals. That's a good word for it.
Radicals. And
Yeah, type in Bill Gates and CIA, like some keywords into YouTube. Bill Gates, CIA. I'll probably get this taken down for that, actually.
perfect. Aren't we just great?
Vaccines.
You can join my club because they pull mine all the time. That's okay. It's real. That's for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I do think
I agree.
yeah, I think this definitely this,
Fun.
what got us off in this, because we could go another 5 hours on brain stuff because I just love it and I've done a lot of research on it. But um he definitely, I mean, playing with dead animals when you're a child and wondering what urine tastes like, there's something different there. There's just something not quite clicking up here.
But
Um,
there is a fine line though, because there are
right.
that I think the reason why, because I can understand, I understand it better.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty open about like, I definitely don't want to be drinking urine, but there are things that I just think in my head, and a lot of times they just come out of my mouth. Like, I wonder what human flesh tastes like. I don't think a lot of other people wonder that, but I do. The difference is it just a wonder, or does it become an obsession that you have to find out? Like, you have to know, and then you get addicted to it. Like, not addicted in the sense of a chemical reaction, but a brain reaction. I think a lot of serial killers were one decision gone wrong, where they started out just as a bit odd or different than other people. And that's why these behaviors that they like the McDonald triad. But at the same time, I think we're all just kind of a couple decisions away from ending up in a different place in our lives. And
Right.
some of us are just a little bit more odd than others.
Right.
I don't think that there's like just truly is just like there's like this evil gene. I think it's more of a whole bunch of bricks. And
Right.
I don't know. They say that there was nothing in his childhood. Like he grew up in this awesome, family unit and it was just idyllic. I highly doubt it. I don't think that is plausible at all. It doesn't make any logic that he didn't have issues. And I don't know, for some reason I think that his mom, there's a song, Melanie Martinez. That's what his family reminds me of. 100%.
Oh,
I'm gonna
yeah.
freaking find it now.
Yeah, you need to find it.
Hmm.
I agree, A West. That's a good statement. You know, it's really interesting that there's times I can be really, really educated in a sense, and there's other times I'm like, I'm such a airbrain. Like, what was I thinking? It
Mm.
it definitely, like I'll have a word in my head or I want to say something and I had it in my head, but oh, it just slipped away.
Which one is it?
But I like A West said, you can't judge a book by its cover. So to speak, a woman's value is not her body in spite of what society tells us. And that is so true.
Dollhouse. Dollhouse. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Hey girl, open the walls, play with your dolls. We'll be a perfect family. When you walk away, it's when we really play. You don't hear me when I say, Mom, please wake up. Dad's with a slut and your son is smoking cannabis. No one never listens. This wallpaper glistens. Don't let them see what goes down in the kitchen. Places, get in your places. Throw on your dress and put on your doll faces. Everyone thinks that we're perfect. Please don't let them look through the curtains. Picture, smile for the picture. Pose with your brother. Won't you be a good sister? Everyone thinks that we're perfect. Please don't let them look through the curtains. Dollhouse, I see things that nobody else sees. Dollhouse, I see things that nobody else sees. Psh, that's like that song in my mind. It just like completely wraps up both families, Baumeister Sr. and Baumeister Jr. Hands down. Guarantee it. It's all fake. I did find his son, though, by the way.
Oh, you did.
Mm-hmm.
Where is he? What's his? Is he a
Still,
doctor? You need to stop out and shut the door behind you, please. Oh, sorry. I forget I can mute myself.
right. He's still in Indiana.
Is he?
Mm-hmm.
What's his what's he doing? Where'd you find him? Because I looked.
Well,
Oh,
it's
don't
the
give your resource. Just you can
no.
tell
I'm.
me. What's
It's
he
my.
doing now?
It's my case, so that tells you anything. But no, I haven't really dug into it that deep. I just cross-referenced the name and the address and everything.
Okay. Well, so
Got old
now,
money. Yep.
oh, sorry, Ivy Rose. That was my husband. He didn't have a cupcake in his hand this time. Um, so I do want, since we were talking about that place was haunted, I didn't want to forget about that. They actually called it the Boneyard. They think that he is still there haunting.
Mhm.
The people that bought the house after them um, are still there. So but they live amongst strange things going on. But I wanted to make sure that they knew.
Right.
They
That's
did the
another
story.
thing, though, real quick, though, before you get into that. Their
Okay.
fake life was because they had that house on contract. I don't think a lot of people know that. Like, they didn't actually, they were contracting it from someone that lived in Kentucky. So it's all about
Oh,
these facades and this fake life that you pretend like you are something, and it's like if people would just stop pretending to try so hard to pretend to be like a good person, then they would
like
actually be
following the Joneses.
right. They would, if you spent the time and that you waste on pretending like it and just do it, then you would be a good person. Like,
Right,
it's
right.
crazy.
Stop trying to be somebody else. Be yourself and be okay with being yourself. I mean, I tease Ange about squirrel, but it's only because I'm a squirrel, you know? I'm like, oh
Mhm.
wait, I can go do that.
Right.
And
I am
and
super
actually, what was that?
I I was just agreeing with Chris.
Oh,
But there are things that I don't know what it is or put a label on it, but I mean, I've had an experiences that like I don't like this kind of stuff because of the way I grew up.
right,
This is all of the devil. Like it's all we're just brainwashed with that. Just everything in the psychic realm and hauntings and
right,
other worldly or whatever, like it's all just the devil. So yeah, I have a real problem with all of it and it freaks me out really bad. But at the same time, I have some experiences that there's no other explanation for them.
right,
So
right. I
this
mean,
story he's
it's
about to
the
tell
way I
is
the way
really
I put it
kind of
in
like
my head.
absolutely like this story, I don't know. I find it very credible. So just try to
Yeah.
like keep an open mind. But
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not your everyday house, but there's when he took them back there, it my assumption would be that a lot of people lost their lives at that house. Um, I it's not that I feed into it or that I believe everything. Um, but I do believe that there's a different world out there. And I think there's good in the world and there's evil in the world. And hold on. I had the best story.
okay, well, I have got to pee. So take the floor.
Go ahead. All right. They ghost hunters, I think, went there. One of the ghost shows. That's what I'm looking for. Give me just a second. I had it on here highlighted. I have about 50 pages sitting here. That doesn't graveyard. Yep, but past that part. Okay, so Hey, they call you guys the Bible Belt in Indiana. I just saw I remembered that when I was younger. I haven't heard that since I lived in Mississippi. So anyways, at this house, hold on, I gotta find it. It's driving me crazy. I know it's here. Okay, so that's Mary. At least it'll be in big. Um, yeah, I mean, different people believe different things. I'm I have to tell you, I was a bit of a skeptic until I got older. And oh, hey, Cold Truth. That's funny. I wasn't expecting to see you on there. Um, when I had an encounter in my bed late one night, but over the years, it's happened before. So on the Gravises, they're the neighbors. They have 10 acres of property. Um, they suggested, they shrugged it off that it's haunted, and they are skeptical. The neighbors are, but they did say weird things started happening about the year after the family moved in. Um, they said that the psychics who had visited the property chalked the sudden hunting up to the presence of Joe LeBlanc, one of his colleagues at the Tom Wood Porsche auto dealership, who had recently moved into an apartment above the home's 5-car garage. LeBlanc was around the same age as many of Baumeister's victims, and they think he was probably playing with them. They say his he stands at the window in the living room. On his iPhone is a recording by the paranormal investigator who toured the property of what the claim is. The voice was saying that he took a pipe to the skulls of his victims. So the Gray's family are far from the only ones who have reported strange going-ons at around Fox Hollow Farm. The blog Real Evidence of the Paranormal records a veritable litany of accounts supposedly drawn from the Grace family and their friends. Reports of strange dreams, misbehaving vacuum cleaners, and the figure of a man in a red t shirt blend with more sinister tales of apparitions, walking without legs, and the feeling of cold hands trying to choke LeBlanc in the pool, which was the owner of the house. The after all of this, the estate has appeared on ghost hunting shows such as Paranormal Witness in 2012 and Ghost Adventures in 2014, not to mention being the focus of a feature length 2011 documentary film, The Haunting of Fox Hollow Farm, which I did watch, by the way. The particular adventuresome can even take haunted tours of the property hosted by American Hauntings Ghost Tours. Their website calls Fox Hollow Farm one of the most terrifying locations we have ever investigated. They claim that the Graves family found even more human remains on the farm and that they have witnessed apparitions and heard voices, knocks, and footsteps in the house. In 2015, the Graves family agreed to allow the haunted attraction company to bring 5 annual trips to the house at around $90 per person. According to Troy Taylor, the founder of American Hauntings, Fox Hollow Farm has never disappointed, with groups that visited the farm reporting everything from voices and footsteps to feelings of being punched, pinched, and even choked. Even if you don't believe in ghosts, Taylor said, there is no denying that a sinister pall hangs over this farm, if for no other reason than it was a place where evil once lived.